The first time I picked up a rifle, I was 8 years old. My father, a retired army sergeant, placed his old Remington in my small hands and taught me how to respect it before I ever learned to fire it. Eleanor, he'd say, a gun isn't a toy, but it isn't something to fear either. It's a tool like any other. By 12, I could outshoot most of the men in our small Montana town. By 16, I was competing in regional championships. By 25, I had a small collection of trophies gathering dust in my childhood bedroom while I worked as an administrative assistant at Blackwater Security Training Center. It wasn't the life I had imagined for myself, but after Dad passed away 3 years ago, I needed steady work. The shooting range manager, Tom Miller, had known my father and offered me a position. Nothing fancy, he'd said, just answering phones and scheduling appointments. But you'll get range time for free. It was enough to keep me in our small town of Westridge rather than moving to the city. I loved the smell of gunpowder and the rhythm of the range. During lunch breaks or after my shift, I would take out my father's old Remington or one of the newer models and practice. The instructors often stopped to watch me shoot, and a few had suggested I apply for a teaching position, but Tom always shook his head. Clients wouldn't take us seriously. I overheard him tell Marcus Peterson, one of the senior instructors, one afternoon when they thought I was out of earshot. They pay good money to learn from professionals, not some secretary who grew up plinking tin cans. I pretended not to hear, but something cold settled in my stomach. It wasn't the first time Tom had dismissed my skills, but it was the first time I realized he would never see me as anything more than the girl at the front desk, regardless of my talent. That same week, I saw the flyer on the bulletin board. Westridge Invitational Sharpshooting Competition. Winner receives $5,000 and entry into the national championship. Below that, in smaller letters, sponsored by Blackwater Security Training Center. And at the bottom, the selection committee members' names, with Tom Miller listed as the head judge. I tore the flyer down and brought it to Tom's office. I'd like to enter, I said, placing it on his desk. Tom looked up at me, then at the flyer, and chuckled. Eleanor, honey, this is a professional competition. These shooters have been training their whole lives. So have I replied, trying to keep my voice level. Tom leaned back in his chair, his expression a mix of amusement and condescension. Look, you're good for a weekend hobbyist, but this is different. These are the best in the state, maybe the region. It wouldn't be fair to put you in that position. I opened my mouth to argue, but he was already turning back to his computer. Besides, he added, registration closed yesterday. I just haven't had time to take the flyer down. I knew he was lying. The deadline was still 3 days away. But as I walked back to my desk, I also knew arguing wouldn't get me anywhere. Not with Tom Miller. The following week, competitors started arriving for the Invitational. Most were men in their 30s or 40s, with expensive custom rifles and an air of confidence that filled our small facility. I checked them in, assigned them lockers, and answered their questions about local accommodation with a professional smile that hid my growing resentment. During my lunch break, I went to the practice range. It was mostly empty, with most competitors resting before the preliminary rounds that afternoon. I sat up at the farthest lane, pulled out my father's Remington, and began my routine. Breathe in, aim, breathe out, fire. The familiar rhythm calmed me, and I hit the center ring 10 times in a row at 300 yards. As I was reloading, I heard slow clapping behind me. Not bad for a secretary, said a voice I recognized as Marcus Peterson's. He approached with another man, taller and broader, with salt and pepper hair, and a custom jacket emblazoned with sponsors' logos. Eleanor, this is Richard Dawson, 3-time national champion. I nodded politely, suddenly conscious of my simple work clothes and my father's worn rifle. Richard was just looking for a quiet place to warm up before the preliminaries, Marcus explained. But I see you've claimed the best spot. I'm almost done, I said, beginning to pack up. No rush, Richard said, his eyes appraising my rifle, then my target sheet. Those are some decent groups. You competing? Before I could answer, Marcus laughed. Edino? No, she just works the front desk. Likes to practice on her breaks. I'd wanted to compete, I said, surprising myself with my candor. But apparently registration closed early. Richard frowned. That's strange. I just registered yesterday. Marcus's smile faltered. Tom must have made an exception for you, being a national champion and all. I finished packing my rifle, my face burning. I should get back to work. Good luck this afternoon, Mr. Dawson. As I walked away, I heard Richard ask, why isn't she competing? Those groups were better than half the shooters I've seen today. I didn't hear Marcus's response, but I could imagine it. Too inexperienced, not a professional, just a hobby shooter. A simple woman who answers phones. That afternoon, I watched the preliminaries from behind my desk, checking scores as they came in. Richard Dawson led by a comfortable margin, followed by a former military sniper named Jason Wright. Tom strutted around like a peacock, shaking hands and taking credit for organizing such a prestigious event. Near the end of the day, Richard stopped by my desk. I asked about you, he said without preamble. They say you were the best shot in town. I glanced around, making sure Tom wasn't nearby. Not according to the selection committee. That's a shame, Richard said. From what I saw earlier, you could give some of these guys a run for their money. He leaned closer. Registration doesn't actually close until midnight tonight. Online submissions only, but still open. He slid a business card across my desk. My sponsor is always looking for new talent. If you change your mind about competing, give me a call. I might be able to pull some strings. After he left, I stared at the card, turning it over in my fingers. The registration fee was $250, almost half my weekly paycheck. But as I watched Tom laughing with the competitors, patting them on the back like old friends, something hardened inside me. I tucked the card into my pocket. The next morning, I arrived early at work to find Tom waiting for me, his face dark with anger. What the hell do you think you're doing? He demanded as soon as I walked in. Excuse me? I set my bag down, trying to look confused. Don't play dumb, Eleanor. You registered for the competition last night. He waved a printout in my face. As a representative of Blackwater Security, I took a steady breath. I registered as myself. I just listed my place of employment. You need approval to represent this facility in a professional capacity, Tom snapped. I'm voiding your registration. On what grounds? I kept my voice calm, though my heart was racing. The rules don't require employer approval. The rules also state that all participants must have verifiable competitive experience, he countered. Which you don't have. I've won 3 regional championships, I said. Check the Montana Sharpshooting Association records. I competed under my maiden name, Eleanor Reed. Tom's face reddened. That was years ago, junior division. The rules don't specify how recent the experience needs to be, or what division, I replied. I'd studied the rulebook carefully before submitting my application. Tom took a step closer, lowering his voice. Listen, Eleanor, I'm trying to protect you. These are world-class shooters. You'll embarrass yourself, and this facility. Then let me embarrass myself, I said. What are you afraid of, Tom? His eyes narrowed. I'm afraid of having to explain to clients why my receptionist is making a fool of herself in a professional competition. It reflects poorly on all of us. Or maybe you're afraid I'll do well, I suggested. Which would raise questions about why I'm answering phones instead of teaching courses. Tom's jaw clenched. You're being ridiculous. And you're also one competitor short of the minimum qualifying score to even enter. So unless you've got that, this conversation is pointless. I pulled out my phone and showed him an email from Richard Dawson, vouching for my skills and officially recommending me for the competition. Tom's eyes widened as he read it. "This is inappropriate," he spluttered. "Dawson hasn't even seen you shoot properly." "Actually, he has," came a voice from the doorway. Richard Dawson stood there, gear bag slung over his shoulder. "Yesterday, I watched Ms. Reed put 10 consecutive shots in the center ring at 300 yards with a standard-issue Remington that's seen better days. If that's not qualifying skill, I don't know what is." Tom looked between us, his face a mask of barely controlled fury. "Fine," he spat. "Compete, but don't expect any support from Blackwater. And your position here will need to be reevaluated afterward." As he stormed off, Richard gave me a sympathetic look. "Sorry if I made things worse." I shook my head. He was already going to make my life difficult. At least now I get to shoot. Throughout the day, I felt the stares of the other competitors as word spread about the secretary who had entered the competition. Some were merely curious, others openly derisive. Marcus Peterson cornered me during my lunch break. "Tom's furious," he said without preamble. "What are you trying to prove, Eleanor?" "Nothing," I replied. "I just want to compete." "Look," Marcus lowered his voice, "if this is about wanting to teach, I can talk to Tom. Maybe start you with some beginner classes, women's defensive shooting, that kind of thing." "I don't want to be given scraps, Marcus," I said. "I want the same chance as everyone else to prove what I can do." He shook his head. "You're going up against former military snipers, Olympic medalists, and professional hunters. People who've dedicated their lives to this." "So did I replied quietly. "You just never bothered to notice." The preliminary rounds began the next day. I had taken a personal day, using some of my limited vacation time to compete. Tom had scheduled me to work, knowing full well my shooting time, and only grudgingly approved my last-minute request when I pointed out it would violate labor laws to prevent me from taking my earned time off. I arrived early, dressed in the most professional outfit I owned: dark jeans, a fitted button-down shirt, and a vest with enough pockets for my shooting accessories. Nothing like the sponsor-covered gear the other competitors wore, but clean and practical. My father's Remington drew looks ranging from amusement to pity. One competitor, a broad-shouldered man named Kyle Wilson, openly laughed. "Is this some kind of joke?" he asked loudly as I sat up in the lane next to his. "That's a hunting rifle from the 90s. "It gets the job done," I replied, focusing on my preparations. "Honey, this isn't deer season in the backwoods," he said. "This is precision shooting. You need precision equipment." I didn't respond, just continued checking my rifle methodically as my father had taught me. Kyle turned to the shooter on his other side. "Tom must be desperate for local entries if he's letting the secretary compete with her daddy's hand-me-down." I felt my cheeks burn but kept my eyes on my work. This wasn't the first time I'd faced such comments, and it wouldn't be the last. When the first round began, I forced everything from my mind except the target. The familiar weight of the rifle against my shoulder, the smooth wood of the stock, the perfect balance that came from years of use. These were my advantages. I knew this gun like an extension of myself. Breathe in, aim, breathe out, fire. My first 5 shots formed a tight group just off center. Not perfect, but within the 9 ring. Kyle, to my right, was shooting well too, his custom rifle barely making a sound through its expensive suppressor. After the first round, I was in 23rd place out of 32 competitors. Not impressive, but not last either. As I packed up my gear, I overheard Kyle talking to Tom near the scoring table. "You read at anyone in these days, huh?" Kyle was saying. "That Reed woman is clearly out of her depth." Tom sighed dramatically. "Believe me, I tried to talk her out of it. But she insisted, and Dawson backed her for some reason. Politics, you know how it is." "Well, she's making your range look amateurish," Kyle replied. "That ancient rifle belongs in a museum, not a professional competition." Just get through the preliminaries, Tom said. She won't make the cut for tomorrow. I slipped away before they noticed me, my hands shaking with anger and hurt. In the bathroom, I splashed cold water on my face and stared at my reflection. My father's words came back to me, Adenor, in shooting and in life. It's not about having the fanciest equipment. It's about knowing your tool, respecting it, and understanding yourself. I took a deep breath. I hadn't come this far to give up because of some harsh words. The second round that afternoon was more difficult. Variable winds and longer distances. I struggled with my old rifle's limitations, finishing in 25th place. The cut for the next day was the top 20. As I was leaving, Richard Dawson caught up with me in the parking lot. Tough conditions out there. I nodded, too disappointed to speak. Your fundamentals are solid, he continued. But that rifle is holding you back. It's all I have, I admitted. Richard hesitated. I have a backup rifle in my truck. Custom Remington 700, similar feel to yours but with better optics, and a match-grade barrel. You can borrow it for tomorrow if you make the cut. I won't make the cut, I said. I'm 5 places too low. Just then, my phone buzzed with a notification from the competition app. Final standings for day 1 had been posted. 5 competitors had been disqualified for rule violations. 3 for modified triggers that didn't meet specifications, 1 for unauthorized communication with a spotter, and 1 for unsportsmanlike conduct. I stared at the new rankings. I was now 20th, the last qualifier for tomorrow's rounds. Looks like you'll need that rifle after all, Richard said with a smile. I spent that evening in Richard's hotel room, not for any scandalous reason but to familiarize myself with the borrowed rifle. It was similar enough to my father's Remington that the transition wouldn't be too jarring, but the quality difference was staggering. The action was smoother, the trigger more responsive, and the optics so clear it almost felt like cheating. Why are you helping me? I finally asked as Richard adjusted the stock for my frame. He was quiet for a moment. I had a daughter about your age. She was a natural shooter, could have gone pro. His voice grew softer. She died 4 years ago. Car accident. I'm sorry, I said, not knowing what else to say. Richard shrugged, his eyes focused on the rifle. When I saw you shooting with that old Remington, hitting center groups despite the equipment, it reminded me of her. She never got her chance. Seems wrong that someone with your talent shouldn't get theirs. I swallowed past the lump in my throat. My dad taught me everything I know. He died 3 years ago. Richard nodded, understanding in his eyes. Then let's make them both proud tomorrow. When I arrived at the range the next morning with Richard's rifle, the reactions were immediate. Tom did a double take, his eyes darting between me and the high-end equipment I was carrying. Kyle Wilson's smirk faltered, and several other competitors suddenly regarded me with new wariness. Where did you get that? Tom demanded as I signed in. It's borrowed, I replied simply. You can't just switch equipment mid-competition, he protested. I pulled out the rulebook I'd studied thoroughly. Actually, Section 7, Paragraph 3 states that competitors may change equipment between daily rounds, provided the new equipment meets all competition specifications. I smiled politely. This rifle is competition legal in every way. Richard had it inspected by the officials this morning. Tom's face darkened. This is inappropriate. Dawson is clearly giving you an unfair advantage. Is it unfair when sponsors provide equipment to other shooters? I asked, nodding toward Kyle's sponsor-emblazoned jacket. Or only when it's me? Tom had no answer for that. As I walked away, I heard him mutter to Marcus, "Make sure the judges scrutinize her every shot." The day's competition was more technical, with shots at varying distances and positions. With Richard's rifle, I felt like I was finally competing on an even playing field. My first series put me in 15th place, and by lunch, I had climbed to 12th. During the break, I overheard several competitors discussing me. Who is she really? One asked. No way a receptionist shoots like that. I heard she was some kind of prodigy, but had to give it up when her dad died, another replied. Dawson's taken a special interest, a third said suggestively. Wonder what that's about. I ignored them, focusing on my preparation for the afternoon session. As I was checking the rifle, Kyle Wilson approached. Nice upgrade, he said, nodding at the rifle. Dawson must really see something in you. Just talent, I replied coolly. Kyle smirked. Sure, that's it. Nothing to do with being the only woman in a male-dominated field. No publicity value there. I met his gaze steadily. If that were true, wouldn't you think there'd be more women competing? The publicity would be just as good for them. Maybe the others know they don't belong, he suggested. Or maybe they've been told that so often they started to believe it, I countered. Fortunately, my father taught me better than that. Kyle's smirk faltered. We'll see how you do when the pressure's really on. Tomorrow's finals are a different game altogether. I smiled. I look forward to finding out. The afternoon session was my best yet. With Richard's rifle performing flawlessly and my confidence growing, I climbed to 8th place overall. The top 10 would advance to tomorrow's finals. As the results were posted, a small crowd gathered around me. Richard clapped me on the shoulder, beaming with pride. Even Marcus looked impressed. Only Tom stood apart, his expression a mix of disbelief and anger. That evening, as I was leaving, Tom called me into his office. You've made your point, he said, closing the door behind me. But this has gone far enough. What do you mean? I asked, though I could guess what was coming. I'm offering you a deal, he said. Withdraw from the finals, citing personal reasons, and I'll promote you to assistant instructor. Women's classes, beginners, that sort of thing. I stared at him, unable to believe what I was hearing. You want me to quit when I've earned my place in the finals? Eleanor, be reasonable, Tom sighed. You've done well, surprisingly well, but tomorrow is another level entirely. The competitors who remain are world-class. You'll be humiliated. And if I'm not? I challenged. What if I place in the top 5? Or win? Tom laughed, but there was no humor in it. That's not going to happen. But on the off chance you don't embarrass yourself completely, I'm prepared to offer you a full instructor position. After a suitable training period, of course. So my choices are to quit now and get crumbs, or continue and maybe get a slightly larger portion of crumbs, I summarized. What if I want the whole meal, Tom? What if I want to be treated like any other shooter with my qualifications? His expression hardened. Then you're living in a fantasy world. This is my facility, Eleanor. I decide who teaches here and who doesn't. And let me be clear, if you go through with this tomorrow and perform poorly, as I expect you will, your position here will be terminated. I felt a cold calm settle over me. Is that legal? Firing me for competing in an event sponsored by the company I work for. I'd be firing you for poor performance and insubordination, Tom replied smoothly. Completely legal. I stood up. Then I guess I'd better not perform poorly tomorrow. The morning of the finals dawned clear and cold, perfect shooting conditions. I arrived early to find a small crowd already gathered, larger than the previous days. Word had spread about the secretary who could shoot, and several local news outlets had sent reporters. Richard met me at the entrance, his face serious. How are you feeling? Ready, I said, surprising myself with how true it felt. After Tom's ultimatum, a strange calm had settled over me. The worst had already happened. I was going to lose my job regardless. All that remained was to show exactly what I was capable of. As we entered, I spotted a familiar figure standing near the registration table. Jennifer Blackwater, the owner of Blackwater Security and Tom's boss. She was rarely at the facility, spending most of her time at corporate headquarters in Billings. Ms. Blackwater, I'd greeted her, extending my hand. I didn't know you were attending the competition. She shook my hand firmly. I wasn't planning to, but when I heard one of our employees was competing in the finals, I thought I should see for myself. Her eyes were appraising. You've caused quite a stir, Ms. Reed. Not intentionally, I assured her. She looked past me to Richard. Mr. Dawson, your reputation precedes you. I understand you've been mentoring Ms. Reed. Richard smiled diplomatically. Just lending some equipment and moral support. Eleanor's talent is all her own. Ms. Blackwater nodded thoughtfully. I look forward to seeing that talent in action. With a slight smile, she moved away to speak with some sponsors. Tom appeared moments later, looking flustered. What did Jennifer want? Just to wish me luck, I replied, enjoying his discomfort. His eyes narrowed. You didn't say anything about our conversation yesterday, did you? I don't need to, I said. My shooting will speak for itself. The finals were structured differently. 10 competitors, 3 rounds of increasing difficulty, with eliminations after each round. The first round would cut to 6 shooters, the second to 3, with the final round determining the champion. As we lined up for the first round, I found myself next to Kyle Wilson, who had qualified in 3rd place. He eyed Richard's rifle in my hands. Last chance to back out gracefully, he murmured. These targets are set for professionals. I checked my lane calmly. Then I'm exactly where I should be. The first round targets were at 600 yards, with variable winds signaled by flags. Difficult, but not impossible. I settled into position, feeling the familiar calm descend over me as I focused on my breathing. My first shot hit the 9 ring, slightly off-center. So did my second. By my third shot, I had adjusted for the crosswind and hit the 10 ring. My remaining shots formed a tight group in the center. When the scores were tallied, I had finished the round in 5th place. Kyle was second, behind a former military sniper. Tom stood at the back of the crowd, his face unreadable. As we prepared for the second round, Ms. Blackwater appeared beside me. Impressive shooting, Eleanor. Tom tells me you've never had formal training beyond what your father taught you. That's right, I confirmed, wiping down the rifle barrel. Yet you're outperforming several decorated professionals, she observed, including some who teach at our facility. I didn't know how to respond to that, so I simply nodded. I find myself wondering, she continued, why someone with your skills is working as an administrative assistant rather than an instructor. Before I could answer, Tom materialized at her side. Eleanor prefers the administrative side of things, he said quickly, though I've often encouraged her to consider teaching. I stared at him, momentarily speechless at the blatant lie. Miss Blackwater looked between us, her expression skeptical. Is that so? How interesting. She turned back to me. Good luck in the next round, Eleanor. I'll be watching closely. The second round was at 800 yards, with targets half the size of the previous round. The wind had picked up, making corrections even more challenging. I took my time, running through all my father's lessons in my head. I finished the round in 4th place, just making the cut for the final 3. Kyle Wilson was eliminated, finishing 5th by a narrow margin. His face was livid as he packed up his gear, pointedly avoiding looking in my direction. As we prepared for the final round, Richard gave my shoulder a squeeze. You've already proven yourself, he said. No matter what happens now. The final round was brutal. 1,000 yards, with swirling winds and targets that seemed impossibly small. Just 3 of us remained, myself, the military sniper named Aaron Jenkins, and a professional hunter named Michael Thornton, who had won this competition twice before. I was to shoot last, giving me time to observe the wind patterns as the others took their turns. Aaron shot well but struggled with the unpredictable winds, putting 2 shots in the 8 ring. Michael was more consistent, keeping all his shots in the 9 and 10 rings. When my turn came, the crowd had grown silent. I could feel Tom's eyes boring into my back, willing me to fail. But as I settled into position, I thought not of Tom or my job or anything else. I thought of my father, teaching me to shoot on cold Montana mornings, his patient voice guiding me. Take your time, Ellie. Feel the wind. Become part of the rifle. When everything is aligned, your breath, your sight, your mind, that's when you squeeze the trigger. My first shot hit dead center. So did my second. And my third. By my fifth shot, whispers were rippling through the crowd. No one had shot a perfect round at this distance in the competition's history. I blocked it all out, focusing only on the next shot and the next until I had fired my final round. When I stood and turned, the crowd's silence was deafening. Then slowly, Richard began to clap. Others joined in, until the applause was thunderous. The final scores were announced. Michael Thornton in third place, Aaron Jenkins in second, and myself, Eleanor Reed, in first place with a competition record. As Richard hugged me and photographers snapped pictures, I caught sight of Tom's face in the crowd. He looked like he'd swallowed something sour, his forced smile not reaching his eyes. Beside him, Jennifer Blackwater was watching me with an expression of intense interest. The award ceremony was held that evening in the main conference room of the Westridge Hotel. I had gone home to change into the nicest dress I owned, a simple black sheath that had belonged to my mother. Richard had insisted on escorting me, saying a champion deserved a proper entrance. The room was packed when we arrived. Competitors, sponsors, local dignitaries, and press filled the space, creating a buzz of conversation that momentarily paused when we entered. I felt dozens of eyes turn in my direction, some curious, some admiring, some still disbelieving. As Richard led me toward our table, Jennifer Blackwater intercepted us. "Congratulations, Eleanor," she said warmly. "You've made quite an impression today." "Thank you," I replied. "It still doesn't feel real." "Oh, it's very real," she assured me. "In fact, I'd like to speak with you privately after the ceremony, if you wouldn't mind." Before I could respond, Tom appeared at her elbow, champagne glass in hand. "Jennifer, the mayor is asking for you," he said. Something about a quote for the press release. She gave him a measured look. "I'm sure the mayor can wait a moment while I congratulate our champion." Turning back to me, she added, "We'll talk later," before allowing Tom to lead her away. Richard and I took our seats at a table near the front. The other competitors were surprisingly gracious, many stopping by to offer congratulations. Even Michael Thornton, who'd placed third, shook my hand and admitted he'd underestimated me. "That last round was something else," he said. "I've been shooting professionally for 15 years, and I've never seen a perfect score at that distance under those conditions." "My father always said pressure either builds diamonds or crushes coal," I replied. Today I guess I was a diamond. Only Kyle Wilson remained cold, nursing his drink at a corner table and glaring in my direction occasionally. When it was time for the awards, the mayor of Westridge took the podium, praising the competition and its contribution to the local economy. Jennifer Blackwater spoke next, her voice carrying authority across the room. "Today we witnessed something extraordinary," she said. "Not just exceptional marksmanship, but a reminder that talent sometimes hides in unexpected places." Her eyes found mine in the crowd. Blackwater Security is proud to have sponsored this competition, and even prouder that the winner is one of our own. Tom shifted uncomfortably beside her, his smile fixed and wooden. "And now," Jennifer continued, "I'd like to invite our champion to say a few words. Eleanor Reed, please join me." The applause was genuine as I made my way to the podium. I hadn't prepared a speech, never expecting to win. "Thank you," I began, my voice shakier than I would have liked. "This is an honor I never expected." I paused, gathering my thoughts. My father was my only shooting coach. He believed that with the right instruction, dedication, and respect for the craft, anyone could become a marksman. He didn't care about fancy equipment or professional credentials. He cared about fundamentals, discipline, and heart. I looked out at the room, finding Richard's encouraging smile. I competed today to honor him, but also to prove something to myself, that I belonged here, on this stage, with all of you accomplished shooters. That sometimes, the person answering the phones might also be the person who can outshoot you. This earned a laugh from the crowd. I want to thank Richard Dawson for believing in me when others didn't, for lending me equipment that gave me a fair chance to compete. I took a deep breath. And I want to thank Blackwater Security for sponsoring this event, even if some within the organization were less than supportive of my participation. A murmur rippled through the crowd, and I saw Tom's face darken. Jennifer Blackwater, however, was watching me with newfound intensity. To any other simple man or woman who's been told they don't belong, that they're not professional enough, skilled enough, or worthy enough, this win is also for you. Thank you. The applause as I stepped down was deafening. Richard hugged me, and several competitors raised their glasses in my direction. Only Tom remained stone-faced, whispering urgently to Jennifer, who seemed to be barely listening to him. As the formal ceremony concluded, and people began to mingle, Jennifer approached me again. That was quite a speech, she said. Particularly the part about being less than supported by some at Blackwater. I met her gaze directly. I believe in honesty, Ms. Blackwater. So do I, she replied. Would you join me for a moment? There's something I'd like to discuss. She led me to a quiet corner away from the crowd. Tom tried to follow, but she stopped him with a raised hand. This is a private conversation, Tom. I'm sure you have other guests to attend to. Once we were alone, Jennifer got straight to the point. I've been watching you closely today, Eleanor. Not just your shooting, which was exceptional, but how you handle yourself under pressure. How others respond to you. I waited, uncertain where this was going. Blackwater Security is expanding, she continued. We're opening a women's-focused training division, catering to the fastest-growing segment of firearms owners in the country. I need someone to head it, someone with both technical skills and the ability to connect with clients who often feel intimidated in traditional gun culture. My breath caught. Are you offering me a job? I'm offering you a career, she corrected. Director of Women's Training Programs, reporting directly to me, not to Tom or any other facility manager. You develop curricula, train instructors, and be the public face of our women's initiative. Starting salary is triple what you're making now, plus bonuses and equipment stipend. I was speechless. Jennifer smiled at my expression. But what about Tom? I finally managed. He's made it clear he doesn't think I'm qualified to teach, let alone direct a program. Tom Miller's opinions on your qualifications became irrelevant about 9 hours ago, when you outshot every professional at his facility. Jennifer replied coolly. Besides, I've been reviewing employee records. Tom's been systematically keeping qualified women out of instructor positions for years, despite their credentials and customer feedback scores. Your situation was just the most blatant example. My mind was reeling. I had no idea it was that systematic. Most people didn't, Jennifer said grimly. But I suspected for some time. Your victory today gave me the perfect opportunity to make changes that are long overdue. She handed me a business card. Think about my offer. I need your answer by Monday. As Jennifer walked away, I spotted Tom watching us from across the room, his expression a mix of anger and fear. When our eyes met, he quickly looked away, making a beeline for the exit. Richard found me moments later. What did Jennifer want? He asked. When I told him about the offer, his face broke into a wide grin. I knew it. The minute I saw you shoot, I knew you were something special. He squeezed my shoulder. Your father would be incredibly proud, Eleanor. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of congratulations and conversation. Several competitors who had dismissed me days ago now sought me out, asking about my training methods and technique. A few female attendees, mostly competitors' wives or girlfriends, told me how inspiring it was to see a woman win. As the crowd began to thin, I found myself standing near the trophy display, staring at the gleaming cup with my name now engraved on its base. Kyle Wilson appeared beside me, drink in hand. Quite the Cinderella story, he said, his tone not entirely friendly. The secretary becomes the champion. Former secretary, I corrected, unable to keep a hint of satisfaction from my voice. Kyle snorted. So that's what Jennifer was talking to you about? Offering you Tom's job? Not exactly, I replied, not wanting to share the details. Well, enjoy your moment, Kyle said, swirling his drink. But remember, shooting a good round in one competition doesn't make you a professional. Some of us have been doing this for decades. I turned to face him fully. You're right, Kyle. One competition doesn't make a career. Neither does expensive equipment or sponsorships. I gestured around the room. But respect does. Talent does. And the willingness to recognize skill regardless of who possesses it. I smiled thinly. Maybe I'll see you at Nationals. Without waiting for his response, I walked away, head held high. 6 months later, I stood in front of a class of 20 women at the newly renovated Blackwater Women's Training Center. The facility, once a neglected annex of the main range, had been transformed under my direction into a state-of-the-art training complex specifically designed to welcome female shooters of all experience levels. Remember, I told my advanced class as they prepared for their certification exam, it's not about strength, it's about technique, consistency, and respect for your equipment. The gun doesn't care if you're wearing lipstick. This earned me a laugh from the group, which included everyone from soccer moms to police officers to competitive shooters. In the 6 months since taking Jennifer's offer, I had developed 3 distinct training programs, certified 15 female instructors, and personally trained over 200 women in defensive and sport shooting. After class, Jennifer stopped by my office, once Tom's office, before his resignation. The official story was that he had decided to pursue other opportunities, but the truth was that Jennifer had presented him with the evidence of his discriminatory hiring practices and given him the choice between quitting or being fired. The registration numbers for next month's workshops are through the roof, Jennifer said, handing me a tablet with the latest figures. We've had to add 3 additional sessions to accommodate the demand. I scrolled through the data, pleased, but not surprised. Word is spreading. Women tell other women when they find an environment where they're respected and taken seriously. Speaking of which, Jennifer continued, I received a call from the National Shooting Sports Foundation. They want you to speak at their annual conference about our women's initiative. Apparently, our retention rates for female shooters are setting industry records. I set down the tablet, momentarily overwhelmed. From receptionist to keynote speaker in under a year. It doesn't seem real sometimes, Jennifer smiled. Success based on merit always feels right, even when it seems surreal. She paused, her expression growing more serious. There's something else. The national championship is next month. As our director, you should represent Blackwater. My stomach tightened. The national championship was the most prestigious shooting competition in the country, featuring the absolute best marksmen and women from around the world. Richard would be there, defending his title. I don't know, Jennifer. I hesitated. Running a training program is different from competing at that level. So is answering phones, she pointed out. That didn't stop you before. Before I could respond, there was a knock at my office door. One of my instructors, a former military sniper named Lisa Johnson, stood there with a newspaper in hand. You need to see this, he said, setting it on my desk. The sports section featured an interview with Kyle Wilson, who had recently won a regional competition in Colorado. The headline read, Champion Shooter Calls for Return to Professionalism in Competition Circuit. The article quoted Kyle claiming that certain recent competitions had lowered their standards to promote diversity hires who lacked the necessary experience and background. While he didn't mention me by name, the implication was clear. He's still bitter, Lisa remarked. Some men just can't stand being beaten by a woman. I folded the newspaper, a familiar determination settling over me. "Jennifer," I said, looking up, "about the national championship. I think I will compete after all." 4 weeks later, I stood on the winner's podium at the national championship, silver medal around my neck. Richard, gold medal gleaming on his chest, had narrowly defeated me in the final round by just 2 points, the closest margin in the championship's history. Kyle Wilson, who had finished a distant 7th, was nowhere to be seen during the awards ceremony. As photographers snapped pictures, Richard leaned over to whisper, "Your father would be bursting with pride right now." "So would your daughter," I whispered back, blinking away unexpected tears. That evening, at the champions' reception, I was approached by a representative from the Olympic shooting team. "We've been watching you, Ms. Reed," she said. "Your rise has been meteoric, and your technique is exceptional. Have you ever considered competing internationally?" Before I could answer, I noticed a young woman hovering nearby, clutching a competition program. She couldn't have been more than 16, with the same hungry look in her eyes that I'd once had. "Excuse me," she said shyly when she saw me notice her. "Are you Eleanor Reed? The woman who went from secretary to champion?" I smiled. That's one way to put it. But I prefer to think of myself as the shooter who refused to be defined by someone else's expectations. She thrust the program forward. "Would you sign this? You're the reason I started competing. My coach said I wasn't built right for it, that I should try something else. But then I read about you." As I signed her program, I saw countless possible futures spreading out from this moment. For her, for me, for all the simple women who just needed someone to open a door they'd been told was closed to them. "What's your name?" I asked the girl. "Melissa," she replied. "Melissa Wright." I handed back her program with a smile. "Well, Melissa Wright, remember this. Sometimes the most powerful shot you'll ever take is the one where you refuse to back down." I nodded toward the Olympic representative, who was waiting patiently nearby. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I think I have an important conversation about the future ahead of me." As I walked away with the Olympic representative, I caught a glimpse of myself reflected in a trophy case. Not the awkward receptionist with something to prove, but a champion who had found her target and never wavered. My father's voice seemed to whisper in my ear. "See, Ellie, I told you. It was never about the rifle. It was always about the shooter." And in that moment, I knew he had been right all along.